Did you know that there's an idea hidden in the notes of Leonardo da Vinci that will make you 10 times smarter? If you're anything like me, then you like to learn new things. You want to be smart, more knowledgeable, and you want to make progress. So you learn, you read books, you listen to podcasts, you watch YouTube videos. And that alone already puts you ahead of most people. For people like us, having multiple interests that we want to learn about can both be a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing because self-education means that you have at least some desire to be better than what you are. But it can also be a curse because you can easily find yourself in beginner hell. So you learn and you learn and you learn. You spend weeks and months, and yet you have nothing to show for it. You haven't implemented the information you learn. And worse, you barely remember what that information even was. And I honestly don't think this is anything new to you. You know that in order to make progress in the things you want to make progress in, you have to implement what you've been learning. And that's exactly what most creators tell you. You have to implement it. But we're not going to start there. In a nutshell, you need to learn how to learn. But before I can show you how the Da Vinci method actually works, you need to know how and why you're learning incorrectly. To best illustrate this, think about a game of football. The objective of the game is to get the ball into the opposition's goal while preventing the opposition from getting the ball into your goal. Everything you do in the game is to either defend your goal or attack theirs. Those are the only two options here. And this means that wherever the ball is on the field, you know exactly what you need to do. When you create tightly defined goals, they effectively frame what you need to do. They act as a filter for the information that you're about to learn. And the best students at university understand this. There is absolutely no point studying anything that isn't going to be on the assignment or the exam. So what the best students do is they only study what's going to be assessed. Because the goal of going to university is to get your degree. And getting good grades make you more desirable to employers. And it's for this reason that the best students are not necessarily the smartest, but instead they just play the game the best. So the difference between the top students and the average students isn't necessarily intelligence, but instead focus. This is the point here, we're talking about focus. But here's the thing, university like football is another tightly defined game. You're given exactly what you need to learn in order to get the results that you want, in order to get the grades that you want. However, as you know, academia isn't the real world. A football game isn't the real world. Real life is much more loosely defined. And so there's another part to this. A couple months ago, I was having some really significant digestive issues. My appetite was gone, my energy levels tanked, I was losing weight. Dude, I was losing my gains that I worked so hard in the gym for, right? I was pretty sick. So I went to the doctor, I got my blood work done. I started experimenting with different diets to see if I could eliminate what foods might have been triggering me. I even got some stool tests. And the results came back and everything was fine. According to the doctor, I was fine even though I didn't feel fine. And this was extremely frustrating because without a clear diagnosis, I didn't know what to do. The evidence was telling me one thing, but my body was telling me another thing. And it's confusing, right? So here's what Greg McKeown had to say in a recent conversation with Chris Williamson on the Modern Wisdom podcast. In the 10 years since I published Essentialism, we moved from an information age to an influence age. The lead characteristic of the information age was distraction. Now the lead characteristic of the new age is disorientation. When you have so much information being thrown at you, particularly conflicting information, it doesn't just result in distraction, but it also results in disorientation. You don't know where you are, you don't know what direction you're facing, and you definitely don't know where you're heading. I could research about the gut-brain axis, IBS and IBD for days and weeks, and I did, by the way, but without a really clearly defined problem, there wasn't much I could do with the information. And so anyone that has been through any mysterious health issues like this can empathize. Diagnosis is hard, but treatment is easy. So the point that I'm getting at here is learning what you need to learn is almost the entire battle. Because once you know what you need to learn, you can learn it and then implement it. And this is the core problem when you're trying to learn new things. You start learning without having a clearly defined goal, and you start learning without having a clearly defined problem. You don't have a filter that selects which information is most relevant to you. And this is where the Da Vinci method comes in, and it's honestly very useful. The Da Vinci method allows you to learn like a modern day polymath, because Da Vinci was the quintessential polymath. He was a painter, sculptor, scientist, mathematician, engineer, and many more other titles. Da Vinci didn't learn in the way that we learn at school. So when we're at school, we're sat down to learn specifically this subject. But Da Vinci didn't approach it that way. Instead, he had things that he wanted to create. Paintings, engineering designs, and mechanical systems. The Vitruvian Man, for example, was a project that Da Vinci needed to learn about human anatomy and also geometry. If you ever played Assassin's Creed 2, when you think of Da Vinci, you probably think of the flying machine that Ezio soared over the tops of Venice, right? And there is some debate whether this was actually a machine Da Vinci built and tested, or if it was just a theoretical design. But regardless, it still required him to learn about human anatomy again in order to get into the damn thing, but also fluid dynamics in order to understand how flight works. And then of course there's just a lot of mechanical engineering in order to go into actually making this thing, or even planning to make this thing. What I'm trying to describe here is that when you're trying to build a project, you have to learn a bunch of different things that would otherwise be disconnected from each other. But the project itself is what connects everything together. And approaching learning in this way actually has a few effects that absolutely supercharge your learning process. So I remember when I was first learning to animate motion graphics. Now, I didn't spend weeks and months learning all there was to know about motion graphics before I was ready to make my own video. Instead, I started with the video. I went into After Effects, and when I didn't know what to do or how to do something, I went to YouTube, opened up a video, and followed along while applying it to the effect that I wanted to create in After Effects. There's something that you don't know how to do, but you want to do it and you need to do it to create what you want to create. And so this means that you already have a tightly defined problem and a tightly defined goal. So you know exactly what you need to search for in order to get your answer. While there might be 10,000 videos about motion graphics, there might be only 1, 2, or 3 videos about specifically the thing that I wanted to learn. And so we've already filtered out all the irrelevant information to only focus on the relevant stuff for what we want to do. So let's say that you've been pretty bored lately. That's a problem that you can solve. And in order to solve it, you decide that you're going to learn how to play the guitar as a new hobby. But that isn't a specific enough goal. Instead, you want to create a goal that is more tightly defined. So you decide, rather than just something more general that I'm going to learn the guitar, you're going to learn your favorite pop song. So you learn it. And then you decide that you're going to learn another one and another one. And then you begin to notice that you play the same chords far more often than any other. And you might have even found a discovery. Did you know that you can play pretty much any pop song from the last 6 decades just from learning 4 chords? It sounds completely insane, I know, but it's true. If you haven't seen Axis of Awesome's 4 chord song, definitely go check it out because it's fucking cool. Building a project allows you to recognize patterns that you wouldn't have otherwise noticed. And this directs your focus to the most relevant things. The very small amount of actions that produce all the results. This is the Pareto principle, or the 18-20 rule. And this basically applies to anything that you want to learn. For motion graphics, it's easing keyframes. For learning Photoshop, it's learning how to mask. For learning how to be really successful on YouTube, it's mastering hooks. And even though it sounds really obvious to say, you wouldn't have noticed these patterns unless you were doing the repetitions. So we've all read a book with pretty good intentions, but just a week later, we forget everything. And there's a pretty obvious reason to why this happens. You didn't remember it because you didn't need to remember it. The information in the book wasn't relevant enough for your brain to actually store it in long-term memory. You make it relevant by building a project that you can apply the information to. So for example, building my body in the gym has been a project of mine for the last several years. And the project required me to learn a lot about hypertrophy, diet for bodybuilding, nutrition for general health, cooking, particularly how to make tasty meals for meal prep, and also how to optimize my sleep for recovery. So whenever I read a book that talks about any of those topics, I automatically have a project that I can apply that information to. And that helps to make it stick in my brain. I've been reading Flow by Mihai Csikszentmihalyi recently, and he talks about how to achieve optimal experience. Basically, optimal experience is when the challenge of what you're trying to do adequately matches the skill set that you have. This means that as you become more skillful and you improve, the challenge of the thing that you're doing needs to also increase. Otherwise, you'll become bored and apathetic. And to me, as I read this sounded a lot like progressive overload in the gym, and that there is a connection. I can apply optimal experience in learning anything to my project of the gym, and that makes it basically impossible to forget. While I'm learning about my interests, I'm always looking for something I call first principles. A first principle is an idea that always holds true regardless of what context it's in. And progressive overload is a pretty good example of this. It remains true for hypertrophy in the gym, but also as a driving force for anything that you want to learn. You're no longer thinking about the knowledge you have as siloed off pieces of information that is separate from everything else. Instead, you have this web or map of knowledge that principles connects to other ideas. And that multi-layered learning allows you to stack your knowledge, and it enables better retention. If that doesn't make sense, I'll have to explain it differently, but in a separate video, because it would take too much time to cobble something together here. But with that said, let's take everything that we learned so far about learning and see if we can actually gamify it. I remember the first time I played The Witcher 3. It was a very different game to what I was used to, because it was the first RPG game that I ever played. And to be honest, I sucked. I sucked hard. At first, I was really clumsy, I didn't understand the game mechanics, and I died a lot and fumbled my way through the first few hours of the game. This is the process of learning. You're meant to struggle. And you understand this. You know that the first 20 hours or so of a game is always going to be a grind. But as you become more familiar with the game and you begin to level up and improve, then everything becomes much easier. And this is the funny thing, because you'll happily go through that learning curve in a game, but not so much when you do it in real life. And there's some really easy reasons why this happens. The biggest barriers to learning are always the emotional barriers. The fear of failing, the fear of being judged, and the fear of looking and feeling stupid. You want to avoid those feelings at all costs, so you stay in tutorial hell and never build the project that you actually need and want to build. So you need to understand that learning in a video game is exactly the same as learning in reality. So every game starts by introducing a big conflict. You know, the massive obstacle that you have to overcome in order to complete the game. This is the equivalent of you reflecting on your life and thinking about what problems you want to solve. I started the YouTube channel for Impactful Ideas after I graduated from university, because now I had a lot of free time and I didn't want to waste all this free time that I had. So I wanted to put my attention and focus into creating something I thought was kind of fun. Reflect on the big problems in your life. Where do you hear that big call to a venture? Because this is the starting point to building your project. So in the game, any game for that matter, between the starting point and the ending point, there is just a bunch of missions that you have to complete. And the only way to improve in the game is to complete the missions. You know this. You don't question this. You're given tasks to complete and you have fun completing them because you understand this is how you inch towards the completion of the game. See, the video game is designed to keep you in the optimal zone of experience. It slowly progresses you from ever increasing challenges as you improve and develop through the game. And that's what makes it fun, because you can see the progress in real time. There's instant gratification, which, by the way, isn't actually a bad thing. You want to have wins for what you're doing because that reinforces the dopamine reward circuit, so you keep doing it. And then you unlock new possibilities and new opportunities in the game that you can explore and improve and get better at. And it all compounds to upward spiral of progress. But unfortunately, reality isn't completely like a video game, because in reality, there isn't anyone telling you what missions you need to go complete to build and achieve the project that you want to build. You have to determine them for yourself. So while you can't just simply launch a YouTube channel, you can break that project into smaller missions to complete. For example, you can come up with a channel name. You can come up with the idea for your first video, then you can outline it, film it on your phone, find a editing software to edit it in, create a thumbnail, give it a basic title, and upload it to YouTube. And the point is, at each mission, you can go learn exactly what you need to learn in order to complete that mission. In the same way that you'll learn footwork for football and study for the assignment or exam, you learn as you build the project you want to build. And you have to understand this. You're going to suck. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be awkward. And you're going to experience ceaseless self-doubt. Even after so many years now of making these YouTube videos, I still experience self-doubt about what I'm doing, but it doesn't stop me from doing it. Do it anyway. You're just a character in a video game that is trying to level up. Struggle isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. Struggle is actually a sign that you're doing everything right, because that is how you know you're learning and you're growing. Then as you improve, you can start to create harder missions for yourself. That could mean trying to inject more storytelling into your videos, or including motion graphics in order to better illustrate the point. You get the idea. If you completed enough missions in the game, you will eventually finish the project, and you'll see that you have developed your skill set immensely. There will be real progress, and you just have to stomach enough failure in order to get there. It's actually quite funny, bro, because when we fail in a video game, we normally don't chastise ourselves about how shit we are. Instead, we simply try again with a slightly different approach. We make these micro adjustments so we can learn what works in the strategy and what doesn't. And you just do this automatically. It's not actually something you think about. So you don't perceive any risk in the game because there's just nothing at stake. But in reality, because there are some stakes and there are some consequences, you may give up before you even try to go through the iterations of these micro adjustments. This game that we're playing, this infinite game of learning, is purely a mental one. The point is, character development needs many failed attempts and many iterations. And always remember, if you are doing something where the challenge exceeds your current skill level, then you can always reduce the challenge so you can go back into the optimal experience. It sounds so simple, doesn't it? Decide on a problem that you want to fix, build a project to solve it, give yourself missions that progressively get harder as you develop, implement micro adjustments until each mission is complete, notice patterns to zero in on what matters most, because these are the things that are going to skyrocket results more than anything else. Find principles that connect to other projects, because that's going to help produce a map of understanding that will help you remember everything you need to learn or everything you need to remember for the project you want to build. So this is how you learn faster than anyone while having multiple interests, and this is how you learn like a modern day polymath. What we talked about more than anything else today really comes down to focus. So if you struggle with distractions, you need to go watch this video next, because it's going to show you why you do what you do and also how to fix it. So if you haven't seen it already, I'll see you over there. If you have, then thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next video.